Sylvan Caryatid on the last turn. Looks like he drew a Temple of Abandon. His Jund Monsters deck list, he made top 8 with this deck in St. Louis. Last weekend when we were the Invitational, he was playing more of a different strategy, a red-black kind of Rakdos, a little bit of mid-range. It did have Rakdos Cackler, but it went all the way up to Stormbreath Dragon.
Yeah, it's sort of a derivative of the Rakdos strategies we saw in Standard 2 years ago, going from Rakdos Cackler up to Thundermaw Hellkite. He was going up to Stormbreath Dragon, had Herald of Torment as a 3-drop or a 5-drop, so definitely a different take, but Kent going back to his roots here with a Jund Monsters deck this weekend.
Ketter with a Scavenging Ooze and an Elvish Mystic. After scrying with Temple of Abandon, you see Grob taking a look at his hand. He does have a copy of Detention Sphere hanging out over there, but he says, you know what, I'm going to take this Pool of Chronos from Ashiok and put that in play. So that's step number 1 for him. We'll see what step number 2 is going to be. Again, his deck list is very interesting. There's a lot of different moving parts here. You would expect to see a card like you have Sky Knight in an Esper Humans deck. You also see Bermaz in his deck list as well, but he's also got Supreme Verdict and some Planeswalkers, so he's doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, he's trying to split the difference, and he has a lot of raw power to glue it all together. Most notably, Elspeth, Sun's Champion, and Obsidat, which work in either a trying to gum down the ground with creatures and play a large threat to win the game, or trying to play a bunch of removal spells and cap the game off with a large threat.
Yeah, the thing that Grob's deck can do is, if he draws the right cards in the right matchup, his deck's going to look great. There are chances for him to draw the wrong cards in the wrong matchup, so we'll see exactly how things do go in this particular match against Ketter, who's looking at a Dreadbore and some other options in his hand. Elvish Mystic was detained by Yev Sky Knight, so he won't be able to use that this turn, but he's going to, looks like, tap that Sylvan Caryatid for a little bit of mana. Going to Dreadbore that Pool of Chronos. It's going to go to the graveyard, and I think it should actually go to Ketter's graveyard since it is his card.
Correct.
But we will get that cleared up in just a moment here. You saw Grob put it in his graveyard, and Ketter says, that is my card, thank you. Now, he does have the opportunity to grow Scavenging Ooze up into a 3/3 if he'd like. He says, I'm going to come into Ashiok. Would you like to trade? The answer is yes, and we'll see if Ketter has a follow-up play here. So take a look at his deck list. Very, very close to what Chris Van Meter wrote about on the Select site this week on Star City Games. There's a couple copies of Reaper, of the Wilds. There's a main deck Sire of Insanity. Of course, you've got your main deck 4 Stormbreath Dragons and 4 Pool of Chronos. He has 4 Domries, 3 Xenagos, a couple copies of Dreadbores and Mortars. So a lot of different things going on here.
Yeah, and speaking of a lot of things going on, there's a lot of things going on with Jonathan's list here as well. We talked a little bit about him trying to split the difference in a lot of different matchups. Blind Obedience is a tool here that he can use if he's either trying to control the game or damage raising. He also has 2 copies of Whip of Erebos, which, again, works if you're trying to race with creatures or if you're trying to control the game with Supreme Verdict.
And with the influx of, red decks and just basic mountains that are happening nowadays, it doesn't really come as much of a surprise to see a card like Whip. A little bit of a surprise to see a card like Blind Obedience in the main deck, but, in the right matchup, it can be a fantastic draw just as a one-of in the deck, so...
Yeah, and part of it is also, he does have 2 copies of Afara, God of the Polis, so there is an incentive to just play stable sources of devotion. So even though Blind Obedience is kind of innocuous, it's fulfilling a lot of different roles here for Jonathan.
Ketter going to start by attacking for 1 with Elvish Mystic towards Ashiok. He feels that he needs to actually take care of that card. Softening Ground going to come into play. Let's see what Ketter's going to do with his mana here. This is 4. This looks like a Reaper of the Wilds with the ability to leave Hexproof open, and it is. So Blind Obedience is going to make sure that comes into play tapped, and you see Grob's hand right now. He has 2 copies of Detention Sphere.
So Kent getting paid off for his decision here to leave up 2 mana, respecting the possibility of Jonathan having a removal spell, and Jonathan with actually 2 copies of Detention Sphere in hand.
Ashiok going to tick up a little bit more. And now this is Afara. We do the devotion check. You've got 2 for Afara, 1 from Blind Obedience, and then 1 from Ashiok. So 3 away. Detention Sphere, of course, will help get there, but Afara right now, just kind of a boring enchantment.
Yeah, but there is a lot of threat here that comes from Kent's side of the table. He needs to get a move on this game. Afara in the long term is just a very challenging card to beat. All of Jonathan's draws of creatures are very challenging to beat going forward.
Ketter going to roll up his sleeves. Look like he's going to do some dirty work here. Reaper going to go after Ashiok. Elvish Mystic going to go upstairs. Grob's going to go down to 18. Going to lose the Ashiok, even though it did exile quite a few cards. Ketter's going to tap some mana here. Wouldn't be surprised if he's going to go for Pool of Chronos, and he is. It'll come into play tapped, of course, due to Blind Obedience, and he'll pass the turn back again with the ability to activate either one of Reaper of the Wild's ability, as Grob does draw a copy of Mutavault. Looks like he's going to deploy a Detention Sphere, getting much, much closer to turning on Afara. You see the devotion count is at 5 now. And if Grob wants to deploy the other Detention Sphere, he can, and that'll actually turn on Afara.
Yeah, I think he needs to do that here. This is a good spot for Jonathan just to get Afara online and start attacking. It looks a little anemic to have to take an Elvish Mystic here, but Kent does have uses for large amounts of mana in his Jund Monsters list, and again, getting Afara up and running is the big priority for Jonathan right now.
Well, Afara's going to come across here for 6, so Ketter's going to go down to 11. He'll take all those cards that are exiled by Ashiok and get those out of the way. He's going to untap. You see a Stomping Ground in his hand? Looks like he drew another copy of Pulachronos, but Afara is really going to pressure him this game.
Yeah, Kent's got 1 Chomp Blocker and Sylvan Caryatid, which is especially good for him because then he gets a Scry Trigger off the Reaper. But, you know, he's running out of time here.
An attack here for 4 is going to put Grob down to 14. Ketter going to cast the Pulachronos in just a moment, just trying to figure out exactly how he wants to do it. I think the big question here for Kent is, do I want to play that Stomping Ground on tap to be able to give my Reaper hexproof?
I don't think he can afford to pay the life here.
Yeah, I think that's the big issue. He would go down to 9. If Afara gets through, he would go down to 3. And then Blind Obedience might be able to actually get the job done. We can't forget about that Mutavault that Grob has as well, as he draws a copy of Temple of Enlightenment and is going to scry.
And this is a really good spot for Jonathan here. He just has total control of the game. If he draws something that allows him to race, he can go ahead and attack with Afara. Or, as you see right here, he can simply say go. And it appears that he's scryed a Supreme Verdict on top of his deck.
And he kept it on top, and now he's leaving Afara back on defense. Now that looks a little bit strange if you're in Ketter's seat, right? Where, well, you attacked last turn, why wouldn't you be attacking this turn? But part of the edge that Grob actually gets from his Esper mid-range deck is redeeming it is the fact that he's just doing a lot of different things. I can't imagine that Ketter knows that a Supreme Verdict is coming.
Right. I think that in that spot, it's still, the story still makes sense if you're on Kent's side of the table, because he has a Sylvan Caryatid back to chump block with. So it doesn't necessarily look suspicious that Jonathan chose not to attack, but it's going to be really hard for him to avoid getting blown out by the Supreme Verdict.
There's an Elvish Mystic off the top there for Ketter, and he's just going to cast that. It's not going to do much in his hand. Little does he know that all of his creatures are going to get swept up here, and that there's going to probably be an Extort trigger as well, as Grob is going to actually draw that copy of Supreme Verdict. He's going to rearrange his mana, figure out how he wants to cast this. And there is the 5.
He doesn't have enough mana left over to attack with his Mutavault.
Yeah.
This is a really rough turn for Kent.
That's a good clean living right there. So the verdict is going to come down. There will be an Extort trigger from the Blind Obedience. Ketter's going to go down to 10. Grob's going to go up to 15. A couple of Scry triggers are going to happen here from the Reaper. 3 of them, as Reaper will not allow a Scry for itself. Ketter's going to put the first one to the bottom. Take a look at the second. And that's going to stay on top. The third will mean that'll stay on top as well. But Grob with an excellent turn. He's going to activate that Mutavault. He's going to be able to get in for 6, 7, 8 points of damage potentially here. I think Ketter looks like he's actually deciding what he wants to do with that second Scry, I think.
Yeah, and it's not even clear what he's really even drawing to at this point, as Kent is going to fall to 2 from this attack, and then even a random blocker doesn't get him out of this.
And Ketter realizes that, and he's going to concede the game. So Jonathan Grob, off of the back of a bit of a wonky combination of cards between Detention Sphere, Blind Obedience, Afara, and Supreme Verdict, able to get the job done. He's up a game here with his Esper mid-range deck to get things started here in day 1.
I don't think that I've ever seen someone cast a Supreme Verdict and maintain devotion for a god. This is the first time, I believe.
Cast Supreme Verdict, and I'm going to attack you for 8-2.
Yeah.
It's your turn. How is this possible? I don't understand what's going on. Either way, able to get the job done. As we're going to move over to sideboards here, I'll take a look at Ketter's, as I do have that in front of me. Taking a look at 3 copies of Mistcutter Hydra, 2 Golgari Charms, 2 Ultimate Price, 2 Mizium Mortars, 2 Abrupt Decay, 2 Thoughtseize, an additional Sire of Insanity to go along with the one in his main deck, a Dreadbore, and of course, what I think is the standard tech here for Kent, Ultimate Decay, scratched out again on his deck list. This is a running joke that began in St. Louis. Of course, he wrote that card down on his deck list, which, as you guys probably know at home, that's not a card. If it were, it'd be a very good one. It's a combination of Ultimate Price and Abrupt Decay. He got a game loss for that. I think it was in the middle of the tournament and won the match anyway, so it didn't come back to hurt him. But I think maybe in Journey Next we'll see Ultimate Decay.
It's about time.
Yeah, that would make me very, very happy.
How about Kent?
As far as options on what he can bring in, I love Abrupt Decay, obviously. You saw plenty of targets with that. You have Sky Knight, Detention Sphere, Blind Obedience, so those will come in. We could potentially see Thoughtseize come in here because, truthfully, I don't think Ken has a good idea of what Grob's up to, and even though we can look at Grob's deck list, we don't have a great idea what he's up to. So Thoughtseize is a nice problem solver there. Golgari Charm, also going to be pretty good against Blind Obedience and, more importantly, Detention Sphere. And we could see Mistcutter Hydra join the party here as well.
Yeah, I think certainly the additional enchantment removal he has access to is really important in this matchup. You saw Blind Obedience and Detention Sphere, and potentially others down the line
and
as well.
And the fact that those cards provide devotion, too, important.
So on Jonathan's side, we have a Revoke Existence, 2 copies of Doomblade, a Supreme Verdict, 2 Thoughtseizes, an Erebos, God of the Dead, and Elspeth, Sun's Champion, a Celestial Flare, 3 Fiendslayer Paladins, 2 Blood Baron of Viscopas, and a Dark Betrayal. I like the additional spot removal, of course, in Doomblade. I think he's going to want the extra copy of Supreme Verdict as well, as he can play kind of an Esper game. That's essentially what we saw in game 1. I think that's his best plan against Jund monsters, as his creatures just pound for pound aren't as good as Palakronos and Reaper of the Wilds. So I think he's going to want to convert into more of an Esper control deck.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the question, who's it favored to go longer? I think Kent is always going to be the aggressive deck in this matchup. Even though his deck is more mid-rangey, I think he has to be, the one who's the aggressor here.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he does have some powerful draws if the game drags out. In Storm Breath Dragon, his Planeswalkers can provide a lot of utility, but it's not going to be better, most likely, than cards like Supreme Verdict and Obsidian.
We are being told right now, by the way, 637 players have come to do battle here in Milwaukee this weekend, so an absolutely fantastic turnout. We do appreciate everyone coming, of course. And what should be one heck of a standard tournament. We got some big name players here, as we did mention right at the top. Owen Turtenwald, Adrian Sullivan, Ketter, who we're watching right now, Eric Rill, Joe Bernal, Sam Black, Matthias Hunt, Matt Hoey, Jeff Hoogland, just to name a few. But we've also got some players who are looking to make a name for themselves this weekend, too, so it should be fun.
Yeah, the Midwest always gets a great turnout, and Milwaukee and Madison have kind of a wonky Magic scene. I mean, the game goes pretty far back there, and there's a lot of characters, so the events in Milwaukee are always a lot of fun.
I always think, whenever I think of Milwaukee, I always think of Kurt Hahn.
Kurt Hahn was exactly the person I was about to name as well.
That's the only, with his just jovial laugh, that's the only guy I can really think of Milwaukee. You see, of course, there's Adrian and again the Madison crowd. And, when I think of Madison, I think of Sam Black because he lives in that area and stuff like that. But Milwaukee, as you mentioned, does have a pretty storied history of Magic.
Yeah, Madison does as well. Madison is the town where the University of Wisconsin is located, which is an enormous university. So
pretty big deal for them right now.
Oh, yeah.
Badgers in the Final Four. Not particularly rooting for them as they're an enemy of Purdue, but...
Yeah, congratulations to the Wisconsin Buzzcuts.
Can they be an enemy if we never beat them? Does that work?
They can be an enemy. They're not a rival.
Okay, got it.
Each team has to be able to win for it to be a rivalry.
Well, it's definitely not that. It's a very one-sided affair.
Yeah.
So we do see both players shuffling up here. Ketter is going to be on the play for game number 2. He's taking a look at his opening 7. Again, it's not easy to put Grob on anything in particular when people are playing these kind of mid-rangey Esper decks. He can have a wide swath of cards, so it'll be difficult for Ketter to actually put his opponent on something, as that Supreme Verdict, for example, was a gigantic blowout in that game.
Yeah, I think you have Sky Knight as the tip-off.
Yeah.
That's the Esper human card right there, because it's in the market to attack and to contain the board a little bit, and you don't really see it in other strategies. A
Mutavault plus a Sylvan Caryatid here from Ketter as he does pass the turn back. Grob put his Obsidian down to the bottom. He's going to play a Plains. Looks like we have a Precinct Captain over there. Also have a copy of Blind Obedience.
Yeah, there's 4 copies of Precinct Captain in Jonathan's deck. It's part of his initial beatdown plan. Also, pretty good source of devotion for Afara. Not a huge fan of Precinct Captain this matchup post-board for a number of reasons. One, Kent's deck is so good at blocking. I mean, you see Sylvan Caryatid, and it only gets bigger from here. And also, I think Jonathan's much better served converting into a Supreme Verdict control deck. And Precinct Captain's pretty incongruous with that plan.
Also, let's not forget that even if Precinct Captain does hit, it makes a fairly irrelevant 1/1 given the matchup.
Yeah,
the creature's so big.
It gets swept away just like everything else once Palakronos gets on tap.
Pretty much. You see Ketter taking a look at his hand. He has another copy of Mutavault that he's considering deploying. Also has a copy of Domri in his hand. He will play the Mutavault. Let's see what the follow-up's going to be. It is going to be a copy of Palakronos, so we'll see if Grob does have an answer to that card. Looks like he has a copy of Ultimate Price in his hand right now at the ready. Draws a copy of Elspeth. There's a Godless Shrine tapped. This is 2 mana. That is an Ultimate Price to get rid of the World Eater. In comes the Precinct Captain. Ketter's going to go down to 18, and we'll see a Soldier token come into play here in just a second.
Hooray! Got a 1/1.
That is a hit.
Yep.
Of course, it is a soldier. It's not a human. As if it were a human, it would be much too good, which is a ridiculous thing to say, but it's actually true.
It would be a meaningful tribe, certainly. Yeah. If Precinct Captain Zathra Necromancer wasn't good enough to start with.
Yeah, that's true. Here's Domri. It's time to go ticking up. It's going to be a miss there for Ketter. Ketter going to play a Stomping Ground untapped. He's going to go down to 16, deploy another copy of Sylvan Caryatid to defend his Planeswalker and simply pass the turn back over to Grob, who's going to untap those permanents. He'll take a draw. It's another copy of Elspeth, so if this game does go long, things are looking very good for Grob, because he does have 4 mana. He's going to tap it right now, and this is a copy of Whip of Erebos. So again, you see how this deck can come from multiple different angles. Now he's going to go attacking. We'll see where these creatures are going to go. If they're going to go towards Ketter or his Planeswalker. Ketter will jump in front of the Sylvan Caryatid, of course. And it is going to go towards the Planeswalker, so Domri will go down to 3.
And I think that he needs to try to contain the Planeswalker if possible, because it's Kent's best tool in the matchup. Kent needs to be able to apply a lot of pressure to the board without folding entirely to Supreme Verdict, and Domri allows him to do that.
Ketter going to start his turn off with a Scry via Temple of Malice. He's going to leave that card on top. Chances are it's a creature for Domri. It's not a guarantee, but Domri will take up. There's a 4. Reveal. It is a Scavenging Ooze. Not the most exciting creature, but better than nothing. As you do see Ketter's hand right now, he's stuck right now with not a great grip. There is the Ooze. He's got a copy of Sylvan Caryatid and just a land in his hand. So you said that he's relying on Domri. I think that's putting it mildly.
Yeah, he doesn't have a lot left over if he gets hit by Supreme Verdict here, just the 2 copies of Mutavault, essentially, if he loses the Domri. The other problem from Ken's side of the table right now is that Jonathan's missing blue mana. So it's very realistic if you're sitting in Ken's seat that your opponent actually does have Supreme Verdict in hand and is waiting on blue mana. It makes the game very challenging to play from here.
There's a copy of Blind Obedience there from Grob, which is not the most exciting of turns, but it's better than nothing as Ketter is going to activate Scavenging Ooze, push himself up to 17, and make that thing a 3-3. You take a look at Grob's hand. He has Detention Sphere. Again, he's missing blue mana to be able to cast that, but the more important part here is that he has 2 copies of Elspeth in his hand, a very, very difficult card for the Jund Monsters deck to beat. And now Grob is in the enviable situation of if he draws a land or a spell, it's happy.
Yeah, particularly if he finds blue mana.
Yeah. Ketter going to play Temple of Abandon. He is scrying here to try to set up Domri as best he can. He puts the top card to the bottom. He's going to tick that up, see if he finds anything. He does. A copy of Mistcutter Hydra, which is acceptable, except for, of course, we know about Elspeth that's hanging out that can take care of a big Mistcutter Hydra with the minus ability or a smaller one with the plus ability to jump block it for days. Not to mention there are a couple white creatures out there right now anyway, and a Blind Obedience.
Yeah, protection from color is pretty hard to use profitably against Esper humans because they have both Detention Sphere and Ultimate Price.
Yeah. So you see Ketter taking a look at the Sylvan Caryatid, looking at that Mistcutter Hydra. I think maybe he's trying to figure out exactly how big he's supposed to make this thing. The answer looks to be rather big. The problem here, of course, is that it will come into play tapped from the Blind Obedience. X is going to be 5, so that's going to be a 5/5 Mistcutter.
And you can see some amount of hesitation from Kent there, knowing that there's a possibility of getting hit by Supreme Verdict, but he doesn't really have the luxury of playing around it at this point.
Speak of the devil, and it shall appear. Supreme Verdict was the draw. That's one of the few cards, actually, as I did mention, that Grob was in the enviable position of basically any card that he draws is good. Well, that was one of the poorer ones, but again, if he does draw a blue source, he's still fine.
Could be really good down the line.
Yeah.
Although now Jonathan has to concern himself with Domri hitting its emblem.
Yeah, and Ketter is really working his way there, as he does take a draw here. It's another copy of Sylvan Caryatid. He's going to take this up to 6. Let's see if he finds anything useful. He does not. Now, doesn't mean that that's a land. It could be a spell. Looks like Mistcutter is going to come into the red zone here. It's going to take down that soldier token. Again, Ketter did see Supreme Verdict last game, so he doesn't probably want to extend those Caryatids, even though they don't really do a ton. I just want to play those. As Grob does draw a card, it's a land, and it's one that provides blue mana. So that's the 6th land for Elspeth. It's also the blue mana for Supreme Verdict and Detention Sphere. He is in the driver's seat now.
Yeah, and I don't even know if he has the luxury of playing Supreme Verdict this turn. He may have to just to play Elspeth.
Well, he does decide to cast the Verdict. I think maybe the thought process here is, yeah, Domri will take up to 7, but I got a D-Sphere to take care of that before it goes ultimate, so that's okay. As you do see, everything is going to get swept away here from the Verdict.
Big step 1 here for Jonathan. If he can get this board stabilized, Elspeth's going to carry the day.
Ketter draws a Blood Crypt. Domri's going to take up to 7. See if Ketter finds anything of consequence. That is a Elvish Mystic, so yes and no. He does get to draw a card. It's just not that good of one, as there is Elvish Mystic. That'll come into play tap from Blind Obedience. We'll see if Ketter wants to fire up any of these Mutavaults this turn. Looks like he's just going to deploy a Caryatid. That'll come into play tapped.
Pretty good spot here, I think, for Kenner to start attacking with these Mutavaults. He's got to start working on Jonathan's life total a little bit.
Yeah.
It's going to be challenging because Whip of Erebos paired with any creature is a pretty big swing, but I can't see it being worth deploying this Caryatid.
You see Ketter going to weigh his options, really hoping that, hey, maybe this Domri can get the job done. Now, of course, we know, just like you guys do at home, that there's a Detention Sphere hanging out in Grob's hands, so it's not really going to be able to get to do it, and he's just going to pass the turn back here. No attacks with Mutavault, as Grob is going to draw a card. It's a copy of Afara.
And it's possible because Jonathan chose not to extort last turn that Kent respects the possibility of a targeted removal spell in his Mutavault. He's willing to hang back.
Detention Sphere plus an Extort's going to come into play here. And you best believe that's going to be targeting Domri once this does come into play. So Ketter's main plan of getting the ultimate there, not going to actually end up working out. See if Ketter has anything to do. You see, yeah, D-Sphere. We'll make sure this is in the right zone. Make it easy for you guys at home there.
Yeah, I was a little curious what was happening there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't see that one very often, but either way, we are okay. As Ketter draws a copy of Abrupt Decay, so he can get his Domri back. That's a step in the right direction. That's exactly what he's going to do. So Abrupt Decay will take care of the Detention Sphere. Domri will come back. It's going to tick up to 4. Ketter looking for a little bit of help. He finds an Elvish Mystic, which again is a creature. It's just not really the help he's looking for.
Yeah, the problem now is that the board's fairly stable for Elspeth to come down.
And that's normally where it reigns supreme. Ketter going to play Elvish Mystic. It'll come into play tap. Blood Crypt as well. Again, I'm a little surprised not to see these Mutavaults get fired up here at some point. As you just see, Grob draws a Plains. And now he's definitely going to play his Planeswalker. He even gets to extort with Elspeth too. So Ketter's going to go down to 15. Grob's going to go up to 23. And now the soldiers are going to start coming.
Yeah, again, I just feel it's Ken's showing a lot of respect for a targeted removal spell that Jonathan can have because of that lack of extorting a few turns ago. But at some point, he's got to start attacking.
Yeah, the big question is, can he actually even beat a targeted removal spell at this point? As you do see a Forest drawn, a Domri going to tick up. Nothing found there for the Gruul Planeswalker. And now Ketter's got to try to slog through an Elspeth, thinking that maybe I only have to slog through 1, but we know that he's actually got to try to slog through 2.
And there's an Afara in Jonathan's hand as well, so we're going to see some combos start happening soon, I think.
Oh, baby.
Oh, yeah.
I like what I see.
Oh, yeah.
We will bring up Afara for you guys here, as you do see a Hallowed Fountain is drawn. You know, we saw it do a nice job last weekend, Travis Harrison's win with Blue-White Devotion. It's not a card that's really stuck yet, but the power level of the new god is rather undeniable.
And actually, I think the first time I saw this card in action was in an Esper list that was playing it alongside of Elspeth and Obsidian.
Uh-huh.
So it's taken a little bit of popularity in blue Splash White Devotion lists. We've occasionally seen it in aggressive white lists that are splashing blue. But the first time I actually saw it was a deck kind of similar to this.
Hallowed Fountain going to come into play untapped here for Grob. You do see Afara come into play. So mana going to be tapped. It's going to be an activation of the whip. Looks like it's going to get back a Precinct Captain. And away we go. That's a fun little interaction. You bring something back with the whip when Afara's in play, draw a card that way. I've never actually seen that one before. Also, when Elspeth makes tokens, you draw a card that way. So Afara is going off. See some blocks are going to take place here.
Kind of a curious attack. Kent's got the ground pretty solidly locked up here. But I think the plan from Jonathan's side at this point is just to try to go ultimate with Elspeth.
Yeah, and I don't think he's going to have a ton of difficulty doing that. He can just really gum up the ground on his side if he'd like, and then work his way towards the emblem plus another Elspeth. So Ketter is going to untap. He's working towards an emblem of his own with Domri, and the Precinct Captain's going to be exiled, of course, because of the whip activation. Grob is going to draw a card from the Afara trigger. He draws another copy, it looks like, of Blind Obedience. Ketter going to take this Domri up to 5. Does not find a creature. This isn't too surprising, the lack of creatures that he's finding, because again, when we did a rundown of the sideboard, he's got a lot of spells in his sideboard, and he's got a lot of spells that he wants to bring in, so that'll bring down the percentage chance that he actually hits with Domri. So this isn't too surprising.
Yeah, this is often the case with Jund and Green-Red in the post-board games is you're cutting creatures for spells.
Yeah.
Often you're cutting mana creatures in the face of Supreme Verdict, or you're cutting some of your not efficient large creatures for more efficient ones, but it does do some damage to Domri in the matchups.
The big problem here, too, is that for Ketter, his heavy hitters that he could actually find with Domri, a card like Stormwrath Dragon, for example, that comes into play tap because of the Blind Obedience. So Blind Obedience really working overtime here in this match.
Yeah, and the second Blind Obedience is now giving Jonathan another dimension to gameplay, which is just potentially burning Ken out.
It'll also add, of course, to the Devotion count. You see a Burmaz drawn this turn. That'll help Devotion as well as just providing a little bit of trouble here. We checked the Devotion for Afara. You've got 2 for itself. You got 2 for Elspeth. That's 4. Blind Obedience is 5. We can see Burmaz plus the other Blind Obedience make it 7. But I'll wait to do that.
And I don't think that the Afara can attack, as Whip of Erebos is not providing Devotion right now.
Yeah, that is correct. That is correct. As good as that card is, it's not that good. And Ketter does correct Grob. You see some activations of Mutavault. Those are going to play defense here. The big question is, what is Ketter looking for with his draw steps? Is there anything that he can find to get himself out of this trouble?
If Jonathan gets sloppy, Golgari Charm could potentially be very powerful.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what he's playing to exactly, but that's the draw that stands out to me as being able to catch up.
There's Burmaz. We'll see if a copy of Blind Obedience has come into play here. You see Burmaz is going to allow an Extort trigger. as will this blind obedience as well. So the slow knife is the deepest.
Not the most efficient operations from Jonathan this turn. Could have deployed the blind obedience first to get an additional extort trigger. Could have deployed Bramaz before combat and gotten to attack with his Afara, but still pretty advanced board at this stage.
And you got to say that Jonathan is pretty far ahead in this situation. As you did mention, there are kind of backdoor outs, for lack of a better term here for Ketter. A card like Golgari Charm, if operations do get sloppy, can allow Ketter to get back into this game. You see a Dreadbore is drawn. That can actually take care of Elspeth. So yeah, you can say that's at least a step in the right direction if there was another Elspeth hiding out in Grob's hand. Ketter's going to tick up his Domri. That's going to stay on top.
It's just a tough spot for Kent. I mean, he's losing the game on multiple fronts right now.
There's Dreadbore to take care of the Elspeth. That line rather predictable, but as you did mention, it is a tough spot because, yeah, he takes care of the Elspeth, but Afara can go active next turn if Grob plays an Elspeth pre-combat, not to mention that he does have a backup Elspeth, a bunch of soldier tokens, a Bramaz, a Whip. Just, this is kind of the appeal of this S mid-range deck, is that it just does a bunch of different things, so it's attacking from a lot of different angles, and you can see all the different angles that are covered here by Grob's board. It's just, there's a lot of different things going on, and Ketter really can't work his way out from underneath all of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of powerful interlocking synergies, and imagine playing against a mono red deck where you have Bramaz and Whip. You might not need any other card to win the game in a lot of spots, so certainly a lot of powerful tools given how beatdown centric the format has become recently.
You're telling people to imagine it at home. You imagine it, Red Man.
It's real bad. I mean, either one of those cards is a bloodbath. So, in conjunction with each other, forget about it.
There's Elspeth plus a double drain here. You saw the Temple of Lightning come into play, a scry action there from Grob, but more important is the Elspeth plus the drains from Blind Obedience. Going to shift the life totals here, going to provide the devotion for Afara so we can actually start to get in the red zone. You see soldiers going to be made, which means Afara can actually allow Grob to draw cards as well. We'll see exactly how he does want to attack here.
I would say get in with everything. And it appears that Jonathan agrees here. I like getting in with everything in this spot.
Everybody in the club, get in there.
Get in.
Your blocks are not great, Mr. Ketter.
I mean, they're good on the surface. He can eat 1/1s with Mutavaults and stuff, but it's not a long-term plan here. And Kent actually needs to protect both his Domri and his life total in all of this too, which is challenging. There's the Golgari Charm to keep his head above water a little bit.
Yeah, not bad. I mean, it does clean up some things here. As you mentioned, that's the kind of card that can actually get Ketter back into the game. So it does -1/-1, clean up a bunch of stuff. But again, there's still just these issues out here. You see Grob's going to draw a card from the Afara trigger, picks up a Godless Shrine. Domri going to tick up. Is it possible we get to a Domri Emblem? It's 2 turns away. He's trying.
He is trying. I mean, it's going to outpace Elspeth's Emblem, but I'm not even sure if Domri Emblem would be good enough in this spot if Elspeth is able to go ultimate as well.
That's a frightening thing to say. You see Grob's going to draw a card. It's another copy of Bramaz. So 2 basically dead cards in his hand right now.
Kent's life total is at serious risk here with the Blind Obedience and all the cards that Jonathan's seeing.
See the attack here with the Bramaz, the new cat token, and then the Afara. The question is, of course, where are these going, and if Ketter wants to maybe get his blocks on with Mutavault, things of that nature.
I mean, in this stage of the game, if I'm Jonathan, I'm going straight at Kent.
Yeah, you're done. You're done. Yeah, and that's exactly what he's doing. He's going straight at Kent. So it sounds like you're done caring about this Domri here.
Yeah, no, Jonathan's going to win the game in the face of a Domri Emblem.
Okay.
Especially if Kent has no board. That's a pretty good way of containing a Domri Emblem.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Going to tick up here. Soldiers are going to come into play. This will allow Afara to draw a card on Ketter's turn, so long as Grob does remember. So 3 more soldiers going to come into play here. Ketter, all he can do is untap and take a draw here. Again, nothing exciting going on. He's got the 2 Mutavaults back there. He's got a Domri that's working its way towards an emblem, but as Patrick did mention, that emblem may not even matter in this particular game.
Jonathan is also at 44.
I forgot that.
Let's keep that in mind in all of this, too.
That's a healthy amount. That's more than double your starting life total. And Grob is just going to pass the turn back. It looks like he'll draw a card from Afara. It's a copy of Yev's Sky Knight. That'll, of course, provide more devotion if he does need it. As Domri does tick up the 7. Can Ketter find a creature?
Jonathan's showing a little respect here for the possibility of an overloaded Byzium Mortars, leaving some stuff back in his hand.
As I think he should. As you do see Stormbreath Dragon here, found from Ketter's Domri. Unfortunately for him, that'll come into play double tapped because 2 copies of Blind Obedience.
Super tapped.
Yeah. This is a Temple of Abandon. It's time to scry. Gonna leave that on top, will Ketter. I would be a touch surprised. I don't know. Maybe I would be, maybe I wouldn't. If Ketter did leave in Byzium Mortars in this matchup, given what he saw in Game 1.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, he didn't see Burmaz.
Yeah.
Burmaz would maybe compel him to leave it in.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So there's Stormbreath Dragon. Gonna come into play tapped, of course, because of the copies of Blind Obedience. You see Ketter with his traditional hood up there, realizing he's in a world of trouble right now. As all he can do is just pass the turn back. Grob gonna draw a card. That's a copy of Godless Shrine. The most important card in his hand right now is the Yev Sky Knight, even though it's not gonna play a huge role since it can't detain anything on Ketter's board.
And I think Jonathan may be a little hasty playing that Godless Shrine tap there before combat, as there's a pretty good chance that, depending on how Kent blocks, he could just cast this random spells in his hand and burn him out through Blind Obedience.
Yeah, that's true. You see an attack here with a bunch of dorks and some real creatures in Burmaz and Afara. Again, we're not exactly sure where all those things are going. Some could be going towards Domri now, some may not. As you do see Yev Sky Knight, did mention that it's not going to have a huge role in the game, but it detains any target non-land permanent, so it could actually detain Domri for a turn, not letting it go ultimate. Now, we don't think that the Domri ultimate is going to play a huge role in this game, but it could actually delay that one more turn if Grob decides that's what's necessary. You see Ketter's going to fire up some Mutavaults and get to blocking here.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is I'm not even sure that Kent's going to be able to survive combat plus Blind Obedience triggers. Having an answer to Domri is nice, but I don't even know if Jonathan needs it from here.
Yeah, if everything did come across, Ketter gets in front of the 3 biggest creatures, it'd be for 4 damage. And then, yeah, we could see just some extorts get the job done.
Although Kent moved the die down on Domri, so it's possible that some of that went at Domri instead of Kent.
And it looks like it did, so some creatures are going to die. Burmaz's soldier tokens will bite the dust. Grob going to play Yev Sky Knight here as he moves up to a cool 58 life, potentially 60 here if he does do some extorting. It looks like he doesn't. He's just going to pass the turn back. So maybe a little touch of faulty operations here by Grob, but he's so far ahead at this point, I don't think it's going to come back to hurt him.
Yeah. There's a lot of things to keep track of with this Esper list, that's for sure.
That is definitely true.
There are a lot of triggers.
Ketter just draws his card. I'm not even sure if there's anything he can draw in this situation.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if Jonathan activated an Elspeth last
Yeah, I don't
turn,
think he did. I don't think he did. As now we have we're going into night mode.
Yeah.
So get your night vision goggles ready here in Milwaukee.
We'll try to get this figured out.
There we go. Thanks, Kent. Kent said, I'm not done playing Magic yet.
Sorry for the problem.
All right, minor technical difficulty, no big.
That's just the magic of live television.
I think Kent was hoping for a bailout there.
Yeah, that's like
yes, you had to reset the match.
Yeah, he's supposed to flip the table then. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
I have no idea. All I know is that I was ahead, and now I'm behind.
The power went out. I don't know what happened. The board state got changed.
He was at 2. I was going to attack with Lethal Dragon, even though that's not true. That was his one out right there.
Yeah, he missed the opportunity.
Yeah.
Some sloppy play by Kent.
Yeah, tough to watch. Just really tough to watch there. Well, you see Ketter's going to analyze this board, say I think he's going to come to the same conclusion, as we have in the booth, which is I don't think there's any getting out of this. But, Kent does love a Stormbreath Dragon, so maybe he wants to flap his wings one time as he's going to draw and play another one this turn.
If I was a fan of Stormbreath Dragon, I wouldn't summon it right now. Don't expose it to this beatdown.
Yeah, this board state.
Yeah.
Ketter going to gamely play on. Maybe his opponent makes some sort of mistake as Grob is going to untap. He's going to take a draw.
The problem is that Jonathan's made some minor inefficiencies each turn, and he's still at 58 life with 12,000 permanents in play.
Approximately. And Ketter is going to concede the game in the face of that Elspeth activation. So Jonathan Grob with Esper mid-range is going to win this match over Ketter and his Jun Monsters deck. Ketter not off to the start that he's looking for in this 10-round tournament, but for Grob, he's got to be happy. Not only just starting 1-0, but defeating a really, really good player there in Ketter.
Yeah, and it was a very lopsided match.
Yes,